Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends at Operation Smile. We're hoping to raise enough money to create 100 new smiles through this partnership, so please donate anything you can at emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we're joined by David Lloyd, the Vice President, Corporate Financial Controller and Treasurer at Greif. Although he's had a highly successful career, VP of Finance isn't a role David ever expected to be in. He discusses the skills needed for success in the finance discipline.
So hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. As my colleague Rose mentioned, we're delighted to have David Lloyd as a guest on the podcast today. So hopefully you can hear me okay, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So whereabouts in the world do we find you today?
So I am in Delaware, Ohio, which is a northern suburb of Columbus. So central Ohio, basically.
Perfect. And I know you've just got back from a vacation as well, I think, with your son on a big swimming event. So hopefully it all went well.
Yeah, it went very well. I don't know that I would call it a vacation, but yeah, I have been traveling quite a bit this summer to swim meets with my middle son DJ. He's a fairly accomplished swimmer, and so he's made some national level type meets that we've had to travel to, which have been really, I think, a good experience for both of us.
No, it's really cool to hear these things are back up and running again, because I know one of the questions that I usually start with on the podcast for most people in the last 18 months has been around the whole COVID situation. I try not to dwell on it too much because I think people are a bit tired of talking about it now, but we're recording this in the end of August, and obviously things are starting to get a little bit better now. But how have you sort of found the whole COVID situation and managed to come through it, really? Is there any hints or tips that you could pass on to other people that are probably still going through these challenges?
Yeah, so from a work standpoint, it has been fairly interesting. So Greif, because of the nature of the products that we manufacture, is considered an essential business, and so we never technically closed. I would probably argue about how essential a corporate office should ever be considered, but our corporate office has been open the entire time. Now that being said, we did basically tell people that, our colleagues that, if they were not comfortable coming into the office, they could certainly work from home. They could work on a hybrid model, really however they chose. And most of our colleagues have taken advantage of that. So where we would normally have, say, 200 people on site, at 250 on site at the corporate office on any given day now, it's usually just 15 or 20 people that are here at any given point in time. And we're going to continue with that sort of what I'll call a manager discretion hybrid model. The plan is to continue with that indefinitely, even sort of post-COVID, where we will continue to give people the option to work from home, either full-time or several days a week, depending on what they and their manager are both comfortable with. So it really has changed the way we are looking at work. We'd already been exploring some of those kinds of activities. We do have colleagues in various roles around the world and in the US that were already in full-time work from home arrangements before the pandemic hit, but going through that process just made us realize that it really was possible for almost everybody, at least on the corporate side, to be fairly effective and efficient on a work from home basis on a broader level than what we had been doing before.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, it's interesting because I know obviously a lot of companies have gone down this route, but I've been having a number of conversations recently, and a big challenge I think a lot of companies and HR people have at the moment related to this is actually now the work from home model is almost seen as a a usual thing to do rather than the perk of the job. It is now quite difficult, and there's a challenge there to maintain the relationship between the team and the manager. The retention of people becomes a challenge, and obviously I think the culture, keeping this great cultures in the business which attract people in the first place, also now becomes a challenge because the culture is impacted if the office is only a certain percent full compared to 100% in the past. I mean, I guess it's the same for you guys there, you know. So, do you think there's anything different or that you've done or planning to do that is going to help with these things, looking forward into the future?
So we have been trying to do a lot more team building and social events virtually over Zoom to try to, I think, compensate for the fact that people aren't together on a regular basis over conference rooms. So whether that's been, virtual happy hours, we've done virtual wine tastings and virtual bourbon tastings and things like that. And then for team meetings, when we'll do broader team meetings for the various functions, we've tried to incorporate more personal elements into all of those meetings to try to help people better connect and feel part of the group. So, for example, my treasury team, we sit all over the world. I've got folks in Amsterdam, I've got folks in Budapest, as well as here in the US. And those meetings happen every other week, but every meeting we basically highlight a different person on the team, and have them do sort of a detailed presentation on their background. So pictures of their family, pictures of where they went to school, previous jobs that they've held. We have them do the Myers-Briggs personality test and kind of talk about what came out of that, and really help us to get to know everybody on a little bit more personal level. For my external reporting team, we do sort of a question of the week at each of our team meetings that's something personal. So that can either be, favorite vacation, what you were doing 10 years ago, favorite movies, and we have everybody on the team sort of answer a different question each week that's a lot more personal in nature. That's worked really well, I think, to try to make everybody feel a little bit more connected as a group, despite the virtual nature of everything.
Mm-hmm.
All of that being said, though, we are still, even with this hybrid model, encouraging people to come into the office for important meetings when they're able to do so. So, if it's a key group meeting or a town hall or something else, we are trying to get people to still come in and connect in person. And we were starting to do that a little bit during the summer. Now we have backed off on that a little bit recently with the surge in cases with the Delta variant here in the area, and so we were doing in-person meetings in conference rooms really for the month of June and July, but we've backed off of that now.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I really like the idea of the question of the week. I think that as you mentioned, it helps for people in the team to get to know each other a bit more, and it's the kind of thing actually that if in normal circumstances you might have small groups of people who know that about each other, but it's certainly not a question you would have had in a team meeting 18 months ago. It would have been very strange questions to throw in there before COVID, but actually now I think it helps to get to know people a bit more. I mean, do you feel that you actually know your team more now as a result of COVID because of these types of initiatives that you've been taking?
Yeah, you certainly, I think we have a better feel for everybody personally. I think we also have a better idea of what's going on with everyone in the team, where before, that was somewhat reliant on you running into someone in the lunchroom and, having a personal chat with them. If you didn't happen to run into them in the lunchroom for months and months at a time, you wouldn't always necessarily know what was going on in that person's life. And so by being a little bit more deliberate about it, in some ways you do feel better connected. The other thing that's nice is, as well, is we had done a fairly large acquisition about a year before COVID hit. And so for my external reporting team, for example, part of my team is here in Ohio. Part of my team sits down in Atlanta. And going through what we went through for the pandemic, I think has let that team down in Atlanta really feel a lot more connected to the team here in Delaware than they probably would have otherwise. And so, it's definitely had some benefits, from an integration standpoint, and really assimilating them into the Greif culture. The fact that we've had to be a little bit more deliberate about these things because of COVID has had some really positive knock-on effects to things like the integration of an acquisition, for example.
No, I mean, I think as Rose and Jenny mentioned in the introduction, I mean, you've had a fantastic career to date, and the experience you've had up to this point is obviously, it's enabled you to, I get, or it's played a big part in how you've been able to come through these last challenging 18 months and create a great culture for your team and the business there. I mean, I thought I always like to ask people what it feels like now for you to be a VP of Finance. I mean, do you feel like you've made it now in your career from all the years of effort you put into it?
It's interesting for me because this is not a role I ever expected to be in. So, VP of Finance, or even eventually CFO, for that matter, was actually never part of my sort of long-term career plans, because I always envisioned myself as someone that was going to be a long-term public accounting guy. So, when I became a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I sort of envisioned that was the end. And that, not that it was the end in terms of, personal development or growth, but that sort of was my long-term career ambition. And having gotten there, it just sort of felt like, okay, mission accomplished. Having moved into industry, though, it has, I think, really helped broaden my skill sets and given me a better and broader understanding of how things work, a better approach to being able to support the business as opposed to just, sort of auditing and evaluating from the sidelines. And I like being able to build a, long-term team, being able to make real changes and make a difference at the end of the day. And so that part of sort of my new career path has been really, really satisfying.
Hi everybody, it's Paul Thomas here. I hope that you're well and you're enjoying the podcast so far. Thank you once again for your continued support listening to the podcast. I just wanted to break into the recording to talk to you about a really exciting new partnership that EMEA Recruitment has along with Operation Smile. And as founder of EMEA Recruitment, it's an honour and a privilege to announce this partnership. Personally, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, so the mission of Operation Smile is something that I have a strong personal connection with. It's not an understatement to say that the dentists and surgeons that helped me were life changers. It's not only about the actual operations that take place, the support and care post and pre-operation are beyond value, and from personal experience I can only say that I'd not be the confident, happy person I am today without this support. I want to help children experience the support and care and skill that I experienced on my journey, and hope that we can do this along with Operation Smile. Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, and the mission of Operation Smile is to provide help and support to these children through providing 6,000 medical volunteers across 80 countries who are dedicated to help these children with facial conditions, most commonly cleft lip and cleft palate. More than 200,000 children are born with a cleft every year, and they are often unable to speak, eat, socialise or even smile. However, it can take as little as 45 minutes and cost just €180 or 182 francs for Operation Smile to provide a child with life-changing surgery. Now, in partnership with Operation Smile, EMEA Recruitment is raising valuable funds and aiming to create 100 new smiles to support the organisation to provide free surgeries for children and young adults all over the world. Please help us by donating through the link in the bio, or get in touch to see how your company can help get involved too. For the moment, I'll leave you to carry on listening to the rest of the podcast, but if there's anything I can do in terms of answering any questions or finding out how you can help and support EMEA Recruitment and Operation Smile, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again and enjoy the rest of the podcast. because I mean, obviously, I also like to ask people how they also got into their chosen discipline in the first place. You know, some people move into their discipline because they've it's part in their blood, you know, from their parents. Other people, you know, just have a desire to do finance or HR or supply chain, and then you find other people just happen to fall into a discipline and realize it works for them, and luck almost takes them that in that path. I mean, what was there anything specific for you that led you to you know, to join Arthur Andersen back in 1991, a long time ago now? But it was it something you'd always wanted to do, or was it yeah, circumstances that led you in that direction?
Yeah, it was completely random circumstances. So I had actually started as a chemical engineering major. My dad was an engineer, and it just seemed like it was something that was in the blood. I had a lot of family members that had done that, and so started down that path in college, and very quickly discovered that I really hated being trapped in basement laboratories with grad students that had been there since the Nixon administration, and pale skin and beady eyes, and didn't really go outside much, and very quickly discovered that was not really for me from a career standpoint. That I enjoyed interacting with people, getting out and experiencing the world a little bit more. As fortune would have it, I was taking basically the intro to accounting class as an elective for my chemical engineering program. You had to have a business elective. And I had looked at this accounting class and said, okay, well, that's math and numbers, so surely that's going to be super easy for me. Not realizing that it was, intended to be a weeding class for the accounting program, designed to sort of get rid of students that didn't really have what it took. And really, had a really inspiring professor in that class that just really piqued an interest for me in accounting. And so very quickly realized that this was a field where, I could take my love of numbers and my love of precision and my interest in being able to solve real world problems, and do it in a way that didn't require me to be trapped in this basement laboratory for the next 20 years of my life. And so, yeah, almost immediately changed my major after that class, and have not regretted that decision ever since. So.
No, that's say, and I think you mentioned there having a love of numbers, and going into this this path. I mean, you tend to find that the people who are successful in their careers, the foundation of it is doing something fundamentally that they enjoy. I think if you can put a tick next to that box, then any challenges that come your way, you can face them in the right way, because you're going to enjoy the core part of the role that you're doing. And I know that actually on your LinkedIn profile, it is very interesting, because I know you focus quite a bit on one of the things you really enjoy is overcoming the problems that other people might run away from. And I know you have a quote on there to get rid of the box instead of thinking outside it. So you've got that kind of double-sided, I suppose, skill sets. You have the accounting ability, the finance ability, but then on the other side of things, the ability and the interest to solve problems and think outside of the remove the box. Let's say it is a good combination of skills for this discipline. So you think that's really that the combination of those two things is what's enabled your success?
Absolutely. The combination of those two things, and then I think a lifelong interest in continuing to learn and continuing to grow and develop. I think someone looking at the profession, at the career from outside, would never, in a million years, think that there was a whole lot of continuing development and learning on the accounting and external reporting side of things, particularly if you're not a CPA that's focused on tax. But it's amazing to me how much things have changed over the years, whether it's new accounting standards or new way of doing things. It's something that's much more interesting to me now in private, because in private industry, because there have been so many changes in just the fundamental operating models of finance, even over the relatively short period of time that I've been in industry in accounting, whether it's transitioning to digital finance, things like AI and machine learning and RPA, and really a move towards more data analytics and business support focus, away from the technical accounting and things like that was really what got me started in this profession. So there's always opportunities to learn and grow, which I think is an important part as well.
Mm. No, and I know also from doing some research into your background, that's something that is very important to you, the learning, development, and pushing yourself to keep going to the next level. And I know you mentioned earlier you had a very inspiring professor when you first started out, and that had a big part in taking you on the start of your career in the finance area. So I just wondered, from all the learning and personal development you've been through, what is the best piece of information or advice that you've taken from all of this, really?
I think the best piece of advice that I've gotten from mentors over the year is just to continue to push and challenge yourself. Look for ways to do things differently, look for new ways to grow. Don't ever feel complacent with what you're doing, because if you get to the point where you're bored and complacent and not feel like you're being challenged and developing, it's probably time to look for a new role, look for new things to get involved in. I've been in this role at Greif now for 7 years. Some of the basic accounting and things like that, particularly now that some of the new standards and things like that have slowed down. There's not as much on the accounting side, but there's so much going on just in terms of overall digital finance transformation that there's never an end of things to get involved in and kind of poke in and develop an interest in some skills in. Always be learning. That's the thing at the end of the day.
No, a few times there in the last few minutes you mentioned about BI, data, digital finance as well, and it's clear that this is something that is going to play a big impact on our lives, both in work and personal lives in the future. And it actually currently is now as well, I would say. I mean, but in terms of the finance function, I mean, how do you think the BI and data, the influx of it is going to change the finance function of the future? Because it's obviously going to have a big role to play in it. So what major changes do you think it's going to bring to the function?
I think it's going to massively change the types of colleagues that we're looking at in finance and the types of skill sets that we want them to have. In some ways it breaks my heart, but it used to be that, sort of the path into industry, and this is what they told us all during school, was to go in and spend 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, whatever, in public accounting and develop those auditing skills and those technical knowledge of accounting and SEC reporting rules and things like that, and then make the jump into industry where those skills and your knowledge of those things will be valued. I feel like that's going to change over the next 10 to 20 years, where in any given company it's going to be a fairly small group of subject matter experts that really need to worry about the compliance and the technical accounting side of things. A lot of the transactional types of things that have historically been part of finance functions, whether it's AP or AR, or even some of the just sort of typical general ledger, senior accountant type activities, are all going to be automated in some form or another. And so your typical finance function specialist is really going to be someone who has a broad level of skills around data analytics, around technology, really good communication skills, and the ability to really be a partner and support the business. Folks are going to be a lot less interested in the technical accounting side of things, and a lot more interested in your skills as an analyst and your ability to deal with and communicate data in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think I started working in finance recruitment 20 years ago, and back then, there were plenty of mandates we worked on where the roles were really they were number crunchers. That there was and the interactions with people were, they were part of the job, but they weren't seen as a big part of the decision making process as who got the job. Whereas now, there's hardly any roles that are out there where being strong in communication isn't a really big requirement for most roles in finance now, and it's I think it's a huge impact on the discipline over the last 20 years. But then, as you say, with BI and data coming in, it is going to further that as well, because if the elements of the technical accounting is reduced to some extent, then actually it's going to be more about how good you are at analyzing and communicating with people who are maybe outside of the finance discipline.
Yep, exactly.
So I mean, with that in mind, obviously, it's been a challenging time for a lot of people in the job markets, and I wondered, how you feel someone can make themselves stand out from the competition in the markets right now. I mean, because I suppose if you look at your background, generally you can see you're somebody who covers both sides of finance and business partnering, but often people struggle with that, or they may not have that level of experience. So what advice would you give to somebody who's out there looking for a job to help them stand out, from the competition in the market?
For us right now, when we're recruiting, the folks that stand out for us are the folks that have done things, from a technology standpoint or from an analytics standpoint. A lot of the universities, particularly in our area, I think have done a great job of developing programs that are focused on, data analytics or communications and things like that. And I think you can really tell the folks that have, uh, you know, done pretty deep dives in those areas and have gotten a little bit more involved in things like that, to the point where you can really see that person, as a really strong long-term finance professional. I think the other thing that can, help you stand out, is being able to demonstrate those communication skills, being able to demonstrate that you've done a lot of work around partnering with the business, around working with others, collaborating, and that you're not someone that just sort of sits behind a desk crunching numbers at a spreadsheet all day long. I think any of the things that you can do like that to differentiate yourself help you stand out. It gets very interesting from a recruiting standpoint. We were talking about the work from home aspect of things earlier in the conversation, and one of the things that we have found is, we're very lucky in Central Ohio that we've got some big universities in the area with some fairly cutting edge programs. But unfortunately for us, a lot of the West Coast firms have figured that out as well. And so, where previously we were just competing with other sort of Columbus area companies for talent, now we've got Google and Facebook and Microsoft and Apple and Amazon that are hiring people on a remote work basis right here in Columbus. And so, as employers, we have to step up our game, in what we are selling as career opportunities to students as much as they need to do things to differentiate themselves. So it's been sort of an interesting dynamic in the talent space.
Mm. No, it's really true, because I think you tend to see it's much more public where people are voicing their challenges when they're trying to find a job. You can go onto LinkedIn or Facebook and see that fairly easily. But one of the things that I found quite interesting, even over the COVID period, there were a lot of companies wanting to recruit, but I had a number of conversations with clients where they were saying we really want people, but we're just struggling to find the best people, because one of the knock-on effects of the whole situation was that there's suddenly a huge volume of people on the market, some through no fault of their own, because of the whole situation. They were made redundant, and if companies were posted an advert on LinkedIn, they were suddenly swamped with hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants overnight, because people were applying because they thought they could work work remotely, or they were just, people applying because they're desperate for a job, and it became very challenging for companies to hire great people as well. And so I thought I'd ask you, what from your experience, what you found has been the best, let's say the most efficient and effective way to recruit, quality people. If there's any learnings you've taken from that experience that you've had.
Yeah, and I guess we were fairly lucky in Central Ohio in that we never really saw, I guess lucky or not, depending on how you were looking at it. From the perspective of the typical finance worker, we did not have a big drop in employment here in Central Ohio, particularly in the professional fields. And so it has been very challenging to find talent all along. Including a year ago, sort of in the depths of the original pandemic, there was really never a surplus of really good finance talent to be had. So we've had to continue to expand the way that we are looking just in order to be competitive. Now, it's been helpful for us that we had already started on a work from home model even before the pandemic hit. And so everybody was a little bit more comfortable with the idea of recruiting talent that weren't necessarily local here to Columbus if we needed to. But we've just had to expand how we've thought about things a lot more, even to the point where geographically, sometimes you'll think, okay, if we're having trouble filling this role in Columbus, is that a role that would be easier to fill in Budapest, or would it be easier to fill in Amsterdam, or would it be easier to fill in Shanghai, where the employment situation may not necessarily be as tight as it is here in Ohio right now? And so, a lot of times we've thought pretty far outside the box in terms of the geographies of where we would be willing to have someone sit and work.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it's interesting, a good approach as well. I mean, I think it's it shows a different angle to finding the best talents, and I think it helps with the reputation of the business on the market by having that that approach. But it obviously has its challenges within it. Let's say if you're managing someone in on European time, you're on US time. I mean, a lot of people work and companies are set up that way, but I guess it is something. It's about the right mindset of the person. If you've got someone working remotely from home in Europe, they need to have that. You got the trust element has to be there for very, very quickly, and they've got to be very driven and motivated to work off their own back, because you're not going to be there to keep sort of prodding them to reach a deadline if they if they're a bit behind on it. So I suppose so much of it depends on the attitude of the person being key and important to getting the right person in on that side.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity for someone coming into a company to, be able to pitch themselves as someone that can be independent, that's a self-starter, that, can take some initiative. And, I would think as a finance person, that would be exciting to be in a position where you had those opportunities to function a little independently without, someone necessarily physically nearby looking over your shoulder all the time. I mean, if I was a finance person, anywhere in the world at this point, I wouldn't be afraid to pitch that to a potential employer. So, if you're sitting in Italy and having an interest in working for a company, in the US or in China or wherever, go ahead and make the case that that's something that you think you could do and be successful at. Because, at this point, most employers have had at least 18 months of experience dealing with that and making it work. And I think folks are a lot more comfortable than they used to be in that kind of environment.
No, true. And no, it's really, and I think it relates back to the question we were talking about earlier about how to make yourself stand out in the markets. If you can take those 3 or 4 points and put some information together as to why you've got the right personality and characteristics to be successful working from home without the management hovering over you to get things done, then I think that goes a long way to showing that you're the right fit for the organization, but also the environment that we're currently in, really. So I think that's all all good advice. And I think I just had a couple of maybe unusual questions to end on. Obviously
Sure.
we've talked a lot about your talents and your abilities that are out there and that people are aware of. But I wondered if you had any hidden talents that maybe you didn't put on your LinkedIn profile. Is there anything there that's in the background that's maybe a love of a certain instruments or sports or whatever that you've got a special talent in?
Yeah, so I'm a piano player, have been since I was little. I am significantly out of practice, just given the age and where my kids are in life. I don't have nearly the time to keep up with it that I used to. But one of my sort of two truths and a lie thing is there's a big concert venue in the U.S. where I grew up in Denver called Red Rocks. And I had the opportunity to play the piano on stage at Red Rocks, which is a pretty beautiful facility. Now, it was simply because that's where my high school graduation was, but it's kind of neat to get the chance to do that on the same stage as someone like Elton John or Tina Turner or who have you. I'm also very, very involved with the sport of swimming. So I mentioned that my middle child is a competitive swimmer. His younger brother is also a competitive swimmer, and because we as a family spend so much time on that, I have gotten involved with it myself. So I'm a certified USA swimming official, and so I spend a lot of time on deck officiating swim meets during the weekend, or either as a starter, or as a deck ref, or a stroke and turn official. And then I sit on the board of Ohio Swimming, where you kind of combine the two, and so I act as the treasurer of the board of Ohio Swimming as well. But yeah, usually if I'm not at work or something like that, you'll find me on a pool deck somewhere.
Oh, that's cool. How do you find it watching your sons when they're racing? I mean, I guess it's always one of those. I mean, my son's into football or soccer, as it is you call it in America, and I think, I find it quite. As a dad, you go through phases during a game or a match, and you sometimes it's difficult to keep control over the emotions. How do you find it when your sons are in the pool in a big race on that side?
Yeah, it's the same thing, and swimming, and it depends on what they swim. But in general, the races are very short, and so you're very emotional for about 30 seconds, and then it's over. Now, my younger son swims more distance events, and so he'll do the mile or the 500 or things like that, and so there it can be, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. But so it's a little bit more time, but a lot of these races, it's just 30 seconds or a minute. And so you're very, very invested and very intense for that very brief period of time. And then you may have a 2-hour wait until their next event. And so it can be quite interesting from that. And it's one of the reasons I decided to become an official, because it's like, okay, you may be at these meets for 12 hours over the course of the day, and you're really only watching your kid for a cumulative total of 4 minutes. And so it was easier for me to be on deck doing things during that, rather than just sitting around for effectively 7 hours and 55 minutes.
So I was going to say your heart rate must look like a high intensive interval training, where you just have a period of time where there's not much happening, and then all of a sudden there's a spike for 30 seconds, and so it's
Yep.
it's a good for the heart muscle as well, I suspect, on that side.
Yeah, exactly.
And then obviously the last question I had was I mentioned at the start that the podcast is in partnership with Operation Smile, and so I thought I'd ask just at the end, what was the last thing that made you smile in your life?
We I think, like a lot of the country, we got a pandemic puppy. So we got a miniature golden doodle, something that our youngest child had been begging for years, and that I was adamantly opposed to, because I was convinced it would never work with our schedule. This dog is the cutest, most loving thing I've ever seen in my life, and makes me smile literally every day. To have someone that cute so happy to see me every morning just always brings a smile to my face. So I'm still not sure it works with our life, but this dog is just absolutely adorable.
That's it. And your children are still looking after the dog at the moment. I mean, I think a time
Oh
will
no,
come when
they do nothing. Yeah, they do nothing. So that lasted for maybe 2 weeks, and then they were sort of back to their normal life.
Yeah. I've been through the same experience, so I'm very glad that you've also had the same situation. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, our son was interested. Then after that, it's all the walking and the poo picking seems to be down to myself and my wife now. But yeah, there you go. But yeah, but no, it's been great speaking to you, David. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know the network will get a lot from this, and as I say, I think an inspirational career to date, and lots more to come. And so hopefully we'll see your sons at the next Olympics maybe in 3 or 4 years time. So that'll be that's really cool to hear they're progressing well on the swimming. And obviously, if any of the network wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn profile. So there's obviously probably hundreds of thousands of David Lloyds out there, but so the easiest way to find me is through Greif. If you type in David Lloyd Greif.
Perfect. Okay. Well, what we'll do when we put the podcast out there, we'll make sure we've got a link to your LinkedIn page on there, because you're right. There's a lot of David Lloyd's on LinkedIn on that side, including the health club chain as well. So that's we'll make sure we put the link on there. But a huge thanks again, David. Really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of the day, the week, and we'll obviously keep in touch.
All right. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you'd like to reach out to Paul or myself, please feel free to send a connection through on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at our website, www.emearecruitment.eu.